o'clock. We got ISM, the services PMI, coming out later today as well. Some people will be paying close attention to that. Raul Paul.
Let me pull this up real quick. Sorry, I didn't have this loaded.
No sweat. No sweat.
And I'm all over the place. There we go. All right. Should be golden.
All right. Golden indeed. So looks like the what's the word I'm looking for? The star of the show today, folks, is going to be the Federal Reserve announcing whether they will or will not hike interest rates yet again in this year. So far, it's been hike. Looks like from where I'm sitting, the market at large has priced in another 25 basis points hike from 5 to 5.25. And overall, I mean, take the massive bank failures out of the equation for a second. I'll argue that the markets are taking it pretty well. The banks, the banking system, there seems to be some participants that just I don't know how they didn't. I mean, I don't know all the details, and I don't like to speculate necessarily based on like the very like thin and sparse amount of information that I as a consumer have, but very interesting and like almost I would call it confusing more than anything else to see we've got this banking crisis that's unfolding where there's sizable banks are having major problems, and yet there's like overall, I dare say that we haven't slipped into a deep recession. And yes, there's some layoffs going on, but I think that I don't know how else to categorize them other than to say that at the onset of the COVID crisis and the dislocations in many organizations that were, or the dislocations that were experienced across a bunch of different or a bunch of different contexts here, mainly like the need to start hiring, oddly enough, in certain areas of the economy, like Facebook's headcount skyrocketed, Binance's headcount had to skyrocket, the technology stocks went through the roof, and they were pricing in the outsized demand, but with understanding the circumstances, it made sense, and they had to scale up. I mean, payrolls grew substantially, and what we're seeing, I think, this is just my opinion, I'm one person, but the point I'm trying to get to is that even though we've had these pretty substantial reductions in headcount in certain technology companies like Facebook, like the usual suspects, or the most prominent players, like Amazon having to mass lay. I wouldn't call them mass layoffs if you look at the percentages. Like Microsoft had to cut headcount, and I think what we're seeing is just a readjustment back to somewhat of a normal balance around, which means that they had to overinvest in certain areas due to outsized demand or like unexpected demand, which was kicked off by the COVID shutdown madness, this whole COVID hysteria thing. Like, call me a conspiracy theorist or whatever, I don't care. The point I'm trying to get to is that the overall things we're still moving like pretty.
Yeah, we're you went into the matrix there for a second. I'm not sure what happened. See if we can get you back here. But
the robots.
Yeah. So I pulled up.
The robots are listening.
So I pulled up a tweet from TED Talks Macro, and it says the market gives a 14% probability that the Fed will pause today, up from 6% yesterday. So one thing that happens when you get these rate hike decisions is everyone kind of speculates on this. And what's funny about this is you can actually bet on this if you want to. Side note, right? But there's so many things happening right now, and there's a lot of pressure from banks clearly to the Fed to stop raising rates, because these rate hikes have put a lot of these banks in big problem territory. And so I saw yesterday, I mean, that there's 5 or 6 more banks that look like they were on the edge. And this is interesting to me too, from another perspective, that when you see this, you would think it would be all over the mainstream media. But when I turned it on yesterday, I just saw the same old stuff. Like, nobody was covering this, and this is a big deal. This affects all markets. This affects everyone's way of life. And I think it's interesting, you have one segment calling for the Fed to pause, right? And you've got a whole other, apparently the only person that knows what Powell's going to do is the fake Zelenskys, right? Like, nobody else in the world knows what they're going to do today. But if you impersonate, a foreign leader and call the chair of the Federal Reserve, apparently the information is just out there and accessible to everyone. So, I don't know if that was a spoof. I don't know if that was, kind of like, a trick to get, anyway. But the whole point is, it's all stupid, right? Like, why we all sit around, we've been doing this for a year, speculating if they're going to raise rates. Like, I think the simple answer is yes, they're going to raise rates. Like, there's, he didn't come this far to stop now, right? And they have the easy excuse of, well, inflation's still high, even though the data they use is lagging, right? And so the worry is, are they going to hike too far and really start to break things? Well, things are breaking, right? Banks are showing signs of weakness and going bust. And so I don't know the goal of the Fed, right? Like, maybe that is the goal. Maybe they're trying, it certainly seems like they're trying to, and I don't know if it's a coordinated effort, but when you have JP Morgan come in and buy First Republic at a pretty sweet deal, it kind of seems like there's an attempt, or maybe not an attempt, but what's happening is you're getting consolidation of these smaller banks into the bigger banks. And maybe that's their goal. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to it's hard to pay attention for any amount of time and not start to see these, or start to make these connections, or these ideas start to spring out of what, like, I mean, you're seeing one thing, you're hearing another, and it just like doesn't make sense. And I don't know that it's supposed to make sense necessarily, because I won't go down that rabbit hole. The point I'm trying to stay on topic. It's it could be that the people in the Federal Reserve from the ivory tower, they understand enough to know that there's weakness in the system, and instead of going, what I'm trying to communicate is simply is that using using monetary policy, which is the Fed's ability to raise or lower interest rates based on what they see or how they see fit to do, they can flush people out of the system, meaning like weak banks. I'll argue that it's really hard to not think that this is way more coordinated than it gets played off in the media. And what I mean by that is that we know that the current administration doesn't like the fact that there's a parallel system that's been like slowly developing over the last 14 years basically, and people are choosing to put their US dollars to work in other alternative, these alternative assets, these digital assets now. And the point I'm trying to get to is that politically it's necessary for them to be against this for any number of reasons. All the puppeteers know why. All the people writing the big checks and telling the political apparatus how to behave have the agenda. I don't know what the agenda is necessarily, but it's hard not to think that this is a coordinated attack to try to, like the choke point thing we talked about before, where like the on and off ramps are being, yeah, all that stuff to try to, instead of, they're smart. They're not going to just say this is illegal now, you can't do this. What they'll do is they'll make it difficult, and it's just enough to scare people to say, this is too much. because look, human beings are wired. Electricity flows the path of least resistance, and we're all lazy as a species. I mean, I try to find the simplest and shortest and least amount of effort to do things, and that's just it's natural. What I'm trying to communicate there is that, like, you introduce the right kind of friction into any process and people just turn off. Like, you know what, this isn't worth it. Like, why am I going to bother to participate in the crypto ecosystem and this new way of doing things if my bank is going to, like, MoonPay is a provider. It's an on and off ramp where you can use your credit card to buy crypto assets. Okay. And banks like JP Morgan will outright just deny transactions, and they hide behind policy. Somebody writes a policy that looks like it's protecting the consumer, but the bottom line is it's protecting the rent-seeking behavior. I'm not knocking rent-seeking behavior necessarily. I'm just saying that JP Morgan and the traditional finance system, they've got their hands on both sides of all these transactions. Like, you and I want to buy something from each other. We use our credit card, go through PayPal. Everybody's got their hand out. They want a piece of the pie. And I'm not knocking making money or anything like that. But the point I'm trying to make is that you hide behind policy. The end consumer in the free enterprise system, if they want to take the money that, like, and this is the worst part about this, is that if you bank with them, you give them your money, you're agreeing to the terms and conditions, and then, ironically enough, you're stuck dealing with the fact that if they don't like who you're about to transact with, or then they'll deny the transaction. So MoonPay, the experience is terrible. Sorry, MoonPay. I mean, I like the idea, but I've had nothing but problems, both in a business context, working with business, like B2B context here, and also as a consumer, listening to people talk about they just want to buy like $10 worth of Ethereum, and they don't understand. Like, even today, as great as Coinbase is, yes, I like Coinbase. They make it easy, but it's still a bit of a challenge, and there's just enough friction there that they try to go to use something like MoonPay, and it just like telling you, the path of least resistance matters. And people, the minute they get scared, and the minute there's a little bit of friction, they just turn off to this stuff. And we got them. Like they're like, you know what? I'm just gonna use my credit card to pay for this, and then JP Morgan's happy, or whoever else is happy, because they get to do their interchange fees and their this fees and this other fees and the other fee, the fee for the fee for the fee to use the network.
No, I mean, there's clearly a reason for them to be, to put friction in the system. But I've got a tweet pulled up. Here's another to circle back around to the Fed. Ahead of today's FOMC decision, it's important to note that inflation remains well above the 2% target policy of 2%. All right, so what Markets and Mayhem is saying is we're likely to hear more about that during the press conference, and it may even leave a window to open for additional hikes in June. All right, and then we've got a tweet from Andrew on Twitter on the payrolls. 296 versus 133K. Expect another Fed hike. Expect more regional bank failures. More of the same, right? And so they've got all the ammo they need to raise rates. Now the question is, at what point do they stop? And that's the $1 million question, right? Because you're sitting here going, okay, there's clearly pressure on banks, and at some point this is going to spill over to, there's issues with credit card loans, there's issues with car loans, there's issues with real estate loans, there's issues with commercial real estate. And one of the things that I thought of, and it's not just me thinking of it, but one of the things that I'm trying to put into my, overall thought process of everything is, okay, look, if I look at this in terms of crypto, and what are they actually trying to do? Well, one of the things I was worried about from the very beginning of crypto is that if crypto starts getting big enough, the powers that be, I think they would try to wreck everything before they let it be successful. And I don't think they're going to be able to stop crypto, right? But they can certainly slow it down. But if slowing it down means sending us into a recession or depression, I think they'll do that. I really do. And you might look at this and say, okay, Josh, that's crazy. Crypto is $1 trillion asset class. They don't care about it. It's not on their radar, other than it is on their radar. And they constantly talk about it. And, they're doing things that are adding friction to the system, albeit, like you said, they're not coming out and directly doing it. But, one way to kind of impact crypto markets is to crash everything else, right? Like, and that's kind of like very biased point of view from somebody who is in crypto every day, and so I recognize I'm aware of my own bias here, but you got to remember that I don't know what these people are doing, and it doesn't make sense to continue to do this. The other problem is if they continue to raise rates, right? We're broke. Like the United States is broke. They're going to run out of money on June 1st, according to Janet Yellen. And so I don't know in this scenario why raising rates makes sense. Like it's there's some objective there, and I don't know what it is. You don't know what it is. Nobody watching this knows what it is, but I just want to throw that out there and say, okay, well, from a crypto's perspective, I don't know, but it might have the opposite effect in the fact that in doing so and trying to crash regional banks, people say, okay, I'm tired of this shit. Like, what other alternatives do I have? And the glaring alternative is Bitcoin and crypto.
Yep.
And so, and that's, look, I don't know that's what's going on. I really don't. But, and just trying to tie all this together, that's just something I think about is like, all right, well, they're going to do this anyway. There's some other, and I think what their agenda is probably much larger than crypto. There's things going on in the world. You've got people in power that are fighting with each other, right? And there's one group of people that, want to go along with a certain agenda. Just take the ESG crowd, and you've got people that aren't buying that. And so you listen to a guy like Tom Luongo, and the guy is saying his thought is essentially the Fed and JP Morgan are basically saying, look, we're not going to submit to Davos and ESG. What we're going to do is, we're going to raise rates and it's going to hurt the United States, but everyone else is going to be devastated, right?
It's going to hurt them a lot more.
Yeah, honestly. And so that's probably more in line with actually what's going on than my crypto conspiracy theory. But it is worth thinking about, at least in that sense, and some of the knock-on effects that, maybe put it this way, say the Tom Luongo theory is right. What you got to think about is, what will that do to crypto, right? And I think what it does is, if you're taking European banks out, if you're taking Davos banks out, these people got to go somewhere, right? And what you're seeing, and the amazing thing about crypto is it is global, right? And so, not every nation state is taking an aggressive approach that's anti-crypto like the United States. So and one more quick thing here too with all this is that, the United States has a different position than the rest of the world because we're the reserve currency, right? And so
still, yes.
Yeah, still. And so, any potential, challenge to that is going to be met with resistance. And so I'll wrap up my crazy crypto conspiracy thought there.
You want to hear crazy? I'll get to crazy in a second. What you just said was downright sensible and made absolute sense. So check this out. The thing that I keep circling back around to in my own mind is something that somebody else, you'll see echoes of this, like little flashes of like sanity, like I'll call them, is that, remember, if crypto was worthless, so what I'm trying to say is that politicians are really good at, there's a saying is that if somebody's talking about stuff and it isn't adding up, you can say they're speaking out of both sides of their mouth. They're saying one thing, and the other thing that they're saying, like they're completely at odds with each other. And that is not an accident. Politicians and people who find themselves in these positions of power where they have to speak to a large audience, and I'm talking like very large, they have to choose their words very carefully. And one way to, like, this idea of cognitive dissonance is something you can look up on your own time, okay? But I'm not going to define it. I don't need to define it. But what I'm trying to say is that, like, for example, Hillary Clinton is not stupid, okay? Whether you like her or you don't, it doesn't matter. She's not dumb. You don't get to be a Hillary Clinton by being a moron, okay?
Yeah, and for purposes of wanting to be alive, I think Hillary Clinton's great.
Yeah, fantastic, very, very brilliant. Okay, yeah. And for the record, I'm not gonna. My suicide is not scheduled yet. Please, Hillary. The point I'm trying to get to is that this talking out of both sides of the mouth is something that the sheeple. I don't like saying it, but I'm going to say it. Is that look, the average person just hinges on the words of the authority. Like we're born and bred to there's like, oh, they could never let this happen, or don't worry, it's all under control. The government has your best interests in mind. That kind of thing. All I'm trying to communicate simply here is that in one breath, we've been told for years that crypto, Bitcoin especially, but everything else in the crypto sphere is worthless, except when you make a profit and the government's like, hold up, I need my cut of that worthless item that you just traded. Okay, oh, you made capital gains? Oh, wait a minute, it's not worthless anymore. We need to calculate how much tax you owe. Okay, and then on the other side, like the one side of the mouth is saying crypto is worthless, Bitcoin's worthless, has no use case. But the other side of the mouth is saying, well, it could be, Hillary Clinton again is saying, oh, it could disrupt nation states or whatever. Insert hyperbolic quote from said figure, public celebrity type political or entertainment industry mouthpiece here, and all that, and people are like the crowd. Like a quick tangent on the former Top Gear guys who started the Grand Tour, the Jeremy Clarkson, Richard Hammond, and James Mays of the world. They do these segments, and they're making fun of the mainstream media and politicians when they do this. They'll do a bit on a car, and they'll talk about how great it is because if they, like, for example, they bashed a Tesla, and then Tesla sued them, and Tesla lost. But the point is that they will talk about a car, how great it is or how not great it is, but mainly they talk about how great these cars are. And then at the end of the segment, they'll go, "I wouldn't buy one though." And the joke, it's not even the punchline. The punchline is that James May or Richard Hammond will go, well, once again, we've given you great consumer advice. And the idea is that, I think you get the idea. The point is that it's unbelievable that in one breath, Bitcoin and crypto are worthless. Yet on the other side, it's, well, wait a minute, we got to make sure that we tax you on this worthless thing. Oh, and by the way, insert other thing here. And then I didn't even get to the insanity yet. So we live in a world where there's a current, this thing, I think it's now active, the idea from the current administration that if you have good credit and you want to get a mortgage, you'll have to pay a certain percentage fee to subsidize people who want mortgages that have lower credit scores. And so what it's doing is it's punishing people with better credit at their expense for people that have worse credit. Now, I'm not. Look, there's circumstances. Obviously, not everybody's credit's going to be the same, and some's going to be higher, some's going to be lower.
But it has nothing to do with net worth either.
Exactly. The point I'm trying to get to is that it's completely wrong, and it's 100% political horse crap. Okay, and the point I'm trying to get to is that we have this type of thing being thrown at us. Then even crazier than that, think about all of the things that we could be concerned with as a nation, and yet the current administration is picking on crypto, and it's making it all the rage, and it's the shiny object syndrome over here. Now, if crypto didn't exist, it would be something else, because this happens all through history. The point I'm trying to get to is that the real craziness is, check this out, in New York, you can get on Twitter and find it, that the current political apparatus, the governing body in New York, is dangling this thing in front of everyone that they're going to ban gas stoves. Like this is the order of the day in 2023 in May. Like this is the top priority, is to tell people we're really concerned about the environment, and what we're going to do about it. This is what we're going to do about it. We need to stop using natural gas stoves.
It's a joke.
Is that the top order of the day? Like it's homelessness and education and all of the other things that the government, these governing bodies, like at the state and like especially New York, God help them. Oh my God, what's going on?
What's so sad about that is New York is a beautiful place, man. You take the history, the
Yes.
business, the diversity, and it's just like California. They've just totally ran it into the ground. But the climate stuff. I mean, what people just need to start saying this, and the climate stuff is ridiculous. It's a control mechanism. Banning gas stoves in the name of climate change, right? Okay, so pretty soon, they'll be banning humans in the name of climate change. I'm not being facetious, like.
Well, that's already happening. I've seen it.
This stuff is patently absurd, and you have to be able to say, look, here's the funny thing is, the further down they go, this rabbit hole that they've chosen, the crazier it gets, and the more people are going to say, okay, look, of course I care about the environment. Of course I want to do everything I can to make this place better than when I came here, but you people are insane. You are making decisions to not protect the environment, but to control people, right? And that's what they're doing. And here's how you know it. They all fly around on private jets. They all have nice homes on the coast. If any of them were serious about this, they wouldn't do any of that. But they're not. It's not a serious conversation. And bring up the idea that let's even challenge the premise of climate change, right? Like, you can't even argue the premise. They'll just say it's done. The debate's over. Okay, well, why are there still like, I don't want to get into this because it's so stupid, but the idea is we should be able to have intellectual conversations around this and not just be pushed aside and said, well, climate change is happening. Let's forget whether it's human caused or caused by the sun, or here's a random idea. What happens if the Earth gets bigger over time? And that sounds crazy, but okay, so all the ice caps are going to melt. But I think this is true, right? Like, so, like, the Earth, when you see it, it's not like the static ball that is just one shape. Like, it breathes. It's an organism, right? Like, it contracts, it expands. Like, we know this, okay? So, like, this stuff is so dynamic, and I'm talking so far out of my league, I'm going to sound like an idiot, so I'm going to stop. But, like, just this general, my point was the idea that you should be able to question things and have debate and then come to consensus as a society has been thrown out the window. You have this group of people that are just going to tell you what science is, tell you what the rules are, and then they're going to make decisions based off of what they say that is in your quote-unquote best interest. Well, I don't know if you've ever been to New York in the winter, but it gets pretty goddamn cold. It's not just gas stoves, right? It's gas heating. I don't think they're going to allow any gas, right? Like, that's the idea. And what it goes to is you get on this credit score. Say all this falls apart, right? Like, the Fed hikes rates to 10%, everything crashes, we're in a deep depression, the money system dies. They come in with a solution that's a CBDC, right? And you are tied to that by your social credit score, right? Back to credit score. And it's not determined by, your purchase history and your ability to repay loans and credit cards. It's determined by the things you say online, and if you line up with the party line. And so, okay, Ted, you were supposed to get your vaccine 2 weeks ago. You didn't. And because your heat is electric, I can turn it off. Me, the government, can turn it off. And because your car's electric, I can turn it off. And you can't drive, heat, go to the grocery store until you get your vaccine. All right. And so when we talk about control, that's what this is. Like, let's be serious. That's what they want. Like, this isn't some conspiracy. They're barrel rolling as fast as they can right at it. And you sit here and I say this stuff, and it's like, I'm going to sound crazy, but it's not crazy because it's happening, right? Like, and that's the rabbit hole that I kind of went down and go down. It's like, this is scary. Like, this isn't just like potentially disastrous. This is 2 years away disastrous.
It is, and I don't mind that we went down this rabbit hole. I think that part of the first step to like getting out of like this trouble that we're in is understanding that there is a problem, and the problem is it's staring us in the face in all these different contexts, and the the point, or the thing I'm trying to spit out now, is that when people start waking up, which I hope they do, I think they need to understand that, like, the things like like the thing you were just describing about the social credit score system thing is already happening in China. Okay, but China's so far away and blah blah blah. But a lot of people don't understand, like, just how totalitarian the Chinese state is. Like, people have long forgotten about Tiananmen Square. They think, it's like, it's so sad because we're a species with amnesia, and every generation comes along and think they got it all figured out, and they don't understand because unfortunately, they didn't live through previous things. Which, I mean, if they were going to be born then, they would have been born then and not now, and all this other logistics crap. The point I'm trying to get to is that people don't understand this is already happening in other parts of the world, and if you don't comply in the Chinese example, I saw something on Twitter. This is probably fake, but it's a good way to illustrate, like, potential. Is that if you have this app, you can know if there are people around you that have a low social credit score, and it explicitly tells you to avoid them. And you can effectively, it's a way to try to shame people into compliance. And I just,
Well, let me give you an example of this, and this is an interesting example. Without even the app, they've done this with Trump supporters. Okay, when I traveled, I was on a group, and this is the funniest. There's 50 of us. Okay, this was in 2017 and 2018, and I voted for Trump. There's a lot of stuff Trump did that I was happy about, and a lot of stuff he did that was frustrating, right? But that's any president. But we had a group of people. There's 50 of us, and I traveled all around the world. And what I will tell people, the only people that were mean to me were the Americans from my own group that disagreed with my political decision. And I have a lot of liberal ideas about other things, but what they've effectively done is labeled Trump supporters as racist, sexist, even though most people that support Trump are none of those things. And it's similar to a social credit score in that if you walk around with a Trump hat in LA or New York or whatever you're effectively pre-labeled something that has nothing to do with you, right? Like, and so I could say that I'm a Trump supporter, but I also support many social issues. It wouldn't matter, like, so it's along the same vein of, and I think it's a problem because individuals are so much more than their political beliefs. They're so much more than their credit score. They're so much more than their, social credit score. But, in a society that puts these labels on people that are unjust and, not true, it's a bigger problem than just, the obvious issues, I guess, is what the idea is.
So circling this back around to crypto,
Yep.
Bitcoin, the rest of crypto, and what are we going to do about this, Josh? I know what we're going to do about it. We're gonna vote at the polls. We're going to vote with our money. We're going to take our purchasing power out of unstable, constantly being debased money. We're going to put it into something else, and that something else is Bitcoin. In this house, we Bitcoin, and we know why.
It's
about freedom.
It's an exit from all the bullshit. That's what it really is. I mean, that's what this is, and that's why you want to become self-sovereign. You want to have control of your own destiny. You don't want to have to watch every single month if the Fed's going to raise rates or not. You don't want to worry if your bank is going to go down, right? And all the money you saved is going to just disappear. Maybe it'll get bought out. Maybe it won't. All this stuff is just crazy. And every day, Bitcoin becomes more and more sane.
Yeah, and this DeSantis here in Florida just did a video on Twitter yesterday, I think, talking about CDBCs and how we're going to outright ban them. And I'm wholly in alignment because it infringes upon our freedom. Like, it doesn't matter if my opinion of the things that you want to buy and sell and transact, or my opinion of who you transact with and what you're transacting over is irrelevant, because here today, at least as far as I know, in the land of the free, home of the brave, the United States of America, we are free citizens. and we can transact and discuss and travel and do things that we want at our discretion. Okay. It's not, I may disagree with what you have to say or who you want to transact with, but what I should be thinking is that I will defend to the death your right to do those things, because if your rights get infringed, my rights get infringed, and it hurts us all. And the point I'm trying to get down to is that, like, the most salient point from that video was that the freedom to transact with people as you see fit. More importantly, in a nation of laws and in a state of laws, if you know what the law is known for the most part, and it's up to the individuals to decide if they're going to participate in society. And I'm talking about the simplest, like shooting someone and robbery is illegal. Okay. I just want to stay on point here, and I apologize for getting off topic.
No, I took us all the way off, man. I jumped, because if we're in Mario Kart, I jumped off the track, man.
But this idea of a very small number of people deciding whether or not you or I should be able, if I want to sell you something and I want to transact with you in Bitcoin or crap coin or any coin, it's not up to the government. I disagree that a government entity or agent or somebody in an elected position is going to tell me how I'm going to, basically how I'm going to live my life. And if they want, if they want to create chaos, be my guest. Go ahead and start. Creating this kind of chaos causes problems for people in their lives, and they get scared and they just end up complying. And then later on, they're like, "Oh my God, this is terrible. What was I thinking?" I'm thankful that I don't see the world that way. I'm willing to endure a little bit of discomfort, and I will absolutely fight for the freedom to transact with. And Elizabeth Warren, I hate saying her name. I hate it, but I'll say it anyway. When she gets up on she gets in front of the microphone, or she gets on the platform that she has access to, and she talks about punishing criminals and money laundering and all this other stuff. It's punishing it's saying that the entire basket of apples is bad because of one, and she's talking all this mean game about crypto, but leaves out the last 30 years of people in the traditional finance system and people working in the banks, facilitating financial crime. No mention of those people. But the point is that I don't care that people are going to choose of their own volition to commit crime and do things that are against the law. That's not the point. We have the freedom here today to choose. And most people choose to transact what I'll call in a normal fashion for goods and services. And you know what? At the end of the day, if somebody wants to buy drugs or anything that's illegal, it's up to them. It's not up to you. It's not up to you. So anyway,
well, no. It's the idea. Here's the general idea. Do you think you can control your money better than the government can? Can you make better decisions with your own money than the government can? And my answer is unequivocally yes. And it doesn't even matter, right? If I make the wrong decision, it's my decision. I don't need somebody who is an oligarch or a socialist telling me what to do with my money. I just don't, and that's not the country we live in, and it's not truthfully, we've tried this, as humans many, many times, right? What's the old punchline? In theory, socialism is great. In practice, it kills millions.
That's right.
And so I don't know how many times we have to try this same worn out experiment before we realize what's going on. But yeah, let's circle it back around. That was my fault. I took us all the way off track with, and again, when we talk about this stuff, I'm a huge fan of just being able to get thoughts out there. It doesn't mean that everything you say is, I 100% believe that, let's just take climate change, it's all hoax, right? No, but we should be able to talk about it, right? And I think it's important to be able to say, you can say things in the spirit of talking and debate, and then not be, punished by, having thoughts, right? And that's another thing too, to get on to when we start to self-censor based off, goes back to social credit. oh, I don't want to say what I really think because I might be punished. Well, that's horrible, right? And what that does is it destroys a society. But anyway, let's get back to before we wrap it up. You wanted to talk about this tweet from Zero Hedge showing the Fed funds rate, and
Yep.
it says tomorrow the Fed will hike to 5.25%. That was the final rate during the 2004-2006 tightening too. So let's kind of let's pontificate on that, and then we can wrap it up.
Sure. History doesn't always repeat itself, but sometimes it sure does rhyme. The point I'm trying to get to here is that leading up to the GFC, the Great Financial Crisis, and you can see on the chart where that started. The point I'm trying to get to is that back in 2000, 2001, 2002, there was probably, you can go back and look at the videotape, there's probably a lot of hemming and hawing in politics about how we have to raise, or in the Fed, we got to raise rates, got to do this. And then what did they do? They started raising rates. And you see in that 2004 block, they started stepping up. And there was, I mean, if that isn't a that's not a stairway to heaven in any stretch. The point is, it got to a certain term, it terminated that hiking, or that energy, or what's the word? Like the policy and the posture changed. We got to a certain point because it ended up, I mean, if you ask me my opinion, I wasn't paying attention back in those days necessarily, but I can tell you that what we've seen recently with this incredible move higher in rates just in the last 2 years, and you see what happened last time they got this high is that it introduced stress into the system. It just happened to manifest itself in the form of the housing bust because, well, there's lots of things that went into that, but it certainly didn't help. And rates had to go all the way to zero, and they stayed there for a long time. And now they're raising, and a lot of things happened in that period where they were at zero. And the system adapted, like I'm talking about the financial system, and markets, more importantly, adapted to this, try to find a way to make money during or in a zero interest rate policy time frame. Rates, go ahead.
No, I just think I'm just looking at this chart, and I just had this thought that, like, hopefully, our grandkids will look back and say, what the hell were they doing? Like, this is absurd. Like, the entire economy fluctuated around what's happening in and around this chart, right? And it just seems absurd. Like, I'm tired of talking about Fed funds rates. Like,
it's ridiculous. At the end of the day, yes, I agree with that. The unfortunate reality is that in a globalized world where the U.S. dollar plays such a prominent role in trade, and the global the supply chains are super complex, and the technology has been great, but in some ways this ability for us as a species to spread our supply chain mechanisms out and move our manufacturing offshore was largely driven by the Chinese, quite frankly, going to war with us in a currency context and devaluing their currency on purpose against the US dollar and making it more financially viable for American manufacturing to pick up, move there. Think about how insane this sounds, is that somebody was able to make a business decision and justify it, saying, you know what, we're going to shut down our entire manufacturing apparatus here in the US, and we're going to rebuild it offshore in China, and we're going to produce the goods there, put them on a boat, float them thousands of miles, put them on trucks, and move them thousands of more miles to distribution centers, and then last mile delivery, and pay for all that. And it's still going to be a better deal for us than manufacturing here. And this was all about currency.
It's an experiment too. Like, it's a fiat experiment. People, we were born, I was born in the 80s, and, we talk about this a lot, the time frame matters. If you were born in the 50s and 60s, the fiat experiment was great for you because you got to experience the front end of it. Now that we're on the back end of the fiat experiment, right, with the US dollar, that it's not working out so great for millennials, and what we're doing is we're trying to build a new system that is a parallel system that can kind of opt out of this. But on the Chinese front, did you know that Bush owned, I forget what the number was, it was some absurd amount, not 100%, but owned a lot of the factories in China. In fact, check me on this. This could be a random bullshit thing that I heard, but it doesn't surprise me, right? And you're going, okay, the president of the United States had ownership interest in factories in China. That seems a little odd to me.
How odd it is.
so it's just go ahead. Sorry.
The thing I wanted to bring it to a close here on this particular chart is that history doesn't have to repeat, but the point I think that we should understand, or the thing that I'm taking away from it, is that the last time we went stair-stepping up pretty sharply in a relatively short amount of time in terms of Fed funds rate, it exposed cracks in the system and probably led to, conspiracy theories aside, there was this stair-stepping up in rates. We had a massive flush down in rates because of the great financial crisis. You see in 2017, 18, 19, rates started to go back up, but they reached about 3% or 2.5% Fed funds rate, and markets went nuts. And they started coming back down, and then you see in 2020 they got reset back to zero. How convenient. But the point I'm trying to get to is, now that we've rushed back up, there's new stress in the system is being exposed. And I think, this is just a hypothesis and just my one heavily biased viewpoint here, is that I think we can't go. I don't know that it's viable. They certainly can they can keep raising all they want. It would create utter chaos, perhaps. But I don't know that it's the right move to keep going much higher than this, meaning they've had a pretty, last thought here is that it's been a pretty safe bet to raise rates up to this point, because you can simply point the finger back at history and say, well, look, we had a Fed funds rates at 5.5%, nearly 6% in the past. It was no big deal. And then the housing crisis, that was some other thing. But the point I'm trying to get to here is that we've had a pretty, with the inflation narrative and all this other madness, rates have gone up pretty darn fast, and we're at a point on the chart where it looks like it's probably going to be worthwhile for them to consider pausing because of all the stress that's being uncovered at this time. That's what.
And these, this is a very, complex and dynamic system we live in, right? And so, we don't know. I don't know. This has been a great learning experience for me over the past year, and it really makes you consider when you're investing, right? You have to consider this. A lot of us, look from 2008 up until 2022, which is when I started investing. I never had to contend with a raising fund rate and what that would do to the economy. So this is, in a lot of ways, probably more normal, right? As in the way these things used to work. But you have to adapt and you have to understand. And what does it mean for crypto? I think what, outside my conspiracy theory, that they're going to tank everything to slow down crypto. I think what it means for crypto is you just keep going, right? We'll see. We don't know the effects it's going to have. Bitcoin's performed relatively well in 2023, despite all this. We'll see what happens if they pause or cut rates. The other thing we haven't talked about is the debt ceiling's coming up. So, say they raise rates and then we default on our debt. What the hell happens then? That thing's going to be a disaster. These Biden and McCarthy aren't going to make some sort of deal that makes sense, right? And if they do, it'll be the last minute and everybody will stress out. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But
in previous look, there's no better guide, not a predictor. There's no better guide than to looking at the past iterations of the debt ceiling thing. And if you haven't lived through it, it's hard to understand, or it's hard to imagine. But these things almost always, at least over the last several years, or at least last several iterations of this insanity around, like, are we going to?
Well, you,
I mean,
you made a
imagine.
great point. You made sorry to interrupt you. You made a great point. There's in the last one, I remember they were shutting down national parks. They're going to shut down the government. Blah blah blah. I've not heard a word about them shutting down the government. I personally, that'd probably be a great thing. Shut down 70% of it and then don't open it again. You know, like.
Yep.
Come
It's
on.
okay. The thing I'm trying to get to is that there's this we've seen this movie several I've seen this movie several times now because of how long I've been participating and paying attention. And each time it has come down to effectively the 11th hour. And the idea is that it gives great cover to be able to back channel and back alley and back this and wheel and deal on these other things that ultimately have to happen. But it's great cover. Just like a recession is a great cover for big publicly traded companies who are under the scrutiny of the FTC and media scrutiny to do layoffs, because they can say, oh, well, our earnings, blah, blah, blah. I mean, insert excuse here, but it's imagine if Google had started laying people off during the COVID, like the uptick in like all. It's never a great time to lay off people as a publicly traded company when things are perceived to be going well for you. Meaning, if the media is talking you up and your stock price is going up and going up and going up, it's the last time that you can really. I mean, it's the worst time, in my opinion, to be able to say, oh well, we're going to take this opportunity to trim some of the like underperformers in our organization, that's never you can't say that out loud as a publicly traded company. You get skewered in the media, and it would just be your shareholders would look at you like well, we're going to drink your blood as soon as we stop bleeding from all the like market cap that's been shed. We're going to drink your blood, and
Well,
you're not going to like it.
The other thing too is, like, look, the system isn't failing; it's working exactly as designed, right? What's going to happen with all this? We're going to end up in a recession / depression, right? We'll see. Whatever. The people are getting laid off, and the ones that have control, that are closest to the decision makers and closest to the money printer, are going to reallocate all the assets from those who, from the bottom, like the ladder, the guys on the top are just going to get more and more and more, and that's how the system is designed. It's not a it's a feature, not a bug. They don't give a shit. Like, this is, if you know how this game is played, you're licking your chops right now, because if you're JP Morgan, this is the best thing that could ever happen. They wait for this stuff. This isn't a problem for them, right? Like, it's a problem for us, but the guys in charge, and let's just not speak generally, like JP Morgan, the billionaires that, the Facebooks of the world, the Amazons of the world, all these companies are well aware of how the system works, right? And it's designed to shift wealth up over time. And that's what we're trying to figure out, right? That's why we're in crypto. And that's a big part of it, is to, get out of this Federal Reserve central bank system that has made all of us debt slaves, right? But that's a whole other topic. We kind of got wild today, went off topic a little bit. And I don't know how any sane person could not talk about something else other than this damn Fed funds rate that we all apparently live and die by month after month after month. But there's only one way to kind of learn, and that's to kind of talk about it and get your thoughts out there, and inform yourself, and make your decisions based off things you learn. And Ted and I reserve the right to change our opinions at a moment's notice without any prior consent. So
We have the freedom to do that still, believe it or not.
as does everybody else. So don't take everything we say 100% seriously, or to again, to make investment decisions. Like, that's the last thing you should do based off these. But
Just trying to make sense of the world that we live in its current form, and hope everyone else is able to try and do the same.
As best we can. This stuff is infuriating. It's insane. It's crazy. But we'll wrap it up there, and we will see you tomorrow. I will throw this disclaimer up. Nothing we say is financial advice. Please do your own research. If you enter the markets and make trades or make investments, you're doing so at your own risk. So that being said, we'll see you tomorrow.
See ya.